For 8 years, I thought I had it all: a loving wife, a cozy home, and dreams of a future filled with happiness. Emily and I were the couple everyone admired. We laughed together, planned weekend getaways, and talked endlessly about having kids. She was the light of my life, and I was certain nothing could dim it. But lately, something felt off. Emily had always been passionate about staying fit, but her recent obsession with the gym was unusual. She'd started going twice a day, early mornings before work and long sessions late into the evening. When I asked about it, she'd brush it off with a laugh. "You know how Mark is," she said, referring to her personal trainer. "He keeps pushing me to reach new goals." At first, I admired her dedication. But then came the excuses. "I'll be late tonight, the gym is hosting a group session," she'd say, or, "Mark wants to discuss my progress over coffee after training." It seemed harmless at first, but soon, her once warm demeanor began to cool. Date nights became rare, and when we did spend time together, she was glued to her phone, laughing at messages she wouldn't share. I tried to brush off the unease gnawing at me, convincing myself I was overthinking. But then one night, everything changed. It was past midnight when I woke up to whispers. Emily was in the living room, her voice low but urgent. "No, we can't do that," she said. "It's too risky. He might find out." My heart pounded in my chest. Who was she talking to? And what was too risky for me to know about? When she came back to bed, I pretended to be asleep, my mind racing with questions. That moment was the crack in the perfect illusion of our marriage. Little did I know, it was only the beginning. After that midnight phone call, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Emily had never kept secrets from me before, and now I couldn't ignore the growing distance between us. I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe I was imagining things, letting paranoia get the best of me. After all, marriages go through ups and downs, right? But the more I tried to convince myself, the more the signs piled up. Emily had always been open about her schedule, but now she'd dodge my questions. "Just another long day at the gym," she'd say with a strained smile, but her eyes told a different story. Her phone became her new best friend, always in her hand, always guarded. If it buzzed, she'd glance at it and quickly tuck it away. The final straw came when a close friend, James, pulled me aside during a barbecue. "Look, I don't want to meddle," James began cautiously, "but have you noticed how Emily's been acting lately?" I froze. "What do you mean?" "She's been spending a lot of time with that trainer of hers, Mark. I've seen them at the cafe near my office. A little too cozy for just fitness talk, you know." I laughed it off, but inside, I was spiraling. Could James be right? Was there something going on? Still, I wasn't ready to accuse Emily without proof. I thought back to the beginning of our relationship, how she'd once told me honesty was the foundation of everything. "I'd rather hear the ugliest truth than the prettiest lie," she'd said. I clung to those words, hoping they still held true. But things only got worse. One night, I noticed she'd left her gym bag by the door. Curious, I peeked inside. Everything seemed normal: clothes, a water bottle, a towel, until I found a receipt. It was for 2 meals at a fancy Italian restaurant. The date was from last week, a night she'd told me she was at a late gym session. My stomach churned. I stared at the receipt, my mind racing. Who was she having dinner with? Why hadn't she told me? I decided to confront her, carefully. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, I asked casually, "How was the gym last week? Did Mark push you extra hard?" Her fork froze mid-air. "Oh yeah, just the usual," she replied too quickly, her eyes flicking away from mine. And just like that, the seeds of doubt turned into something darker: suspicion. I didn't want to believe it, but the cracks in our marriage were widening, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could ignore them. The receipt haunted me. I tried to convince myself there was an innocent explanation. Maybe she went out with a friend and forgot to mention it. But deep down, I knew better. Something didn't add up, and the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I needed answers. The next evening, Emily was unusually cheerful. She told me she'd be working late at the gym again and left without hesitation. That's when I decided to act. I waited for her to leave, then grabbed my coat and followed her. It wasn't difficult to tail her car. She drove straight to the gym. I parked across the street, watching as she walked inside. For a moment, I felt foolish. Maybe she really was working out late, and I was just being paranoid. But then, as I sat in my car debating whether to leave, something caught my attention. Emily wasn't alone. She came out of the gym less than an hour later, laughing with her trainer, Mark. They stood by his car, talking in hushed tones. I couldn't hear them, but their body language was clear. Too close, too comfortable. My stomach churned as Mark leaned in, brushing her hair out of her face. And then he touched her cheek. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. I wanted to storm out of the car and demand answers right then and there, but something held me back. If I confronted her now, she'd just deny it. I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. The next day, I took things further. I installed a GPS tracker on her car while she was in the shower. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd do, but I needed to know the truth. It didn't take long for the tracker to deliver results. Emily's gym sessions were taking her to places that had nothing to do with fitness. A secluded park, a downtown cafe, even a hotel. My heart sank every time I checked the tracker, but I couldn't stop myself. One evening, while Emily was out, I finally cracked. I called my best friend, James. "I think she's cheating on me," I blurted out. James didn't sound surprised. "I was afraid of this," he admitted. "But you need to be smart about how you handle it. Don't jump to conclusions until you have solid proof." I hated hearing those words, but he was right. So, I waited. And as I waited, I noticed more signs. Her excuses were thinner, her stories less believable. The final straw came when I found her gym bag again, this time with something worse than a receipt. Buried beneath her clothes was a small, folded note in handwriting that wasn't hers. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I'll make it worth your while." It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. My hands shook as I held the note. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was real. I stared at the note, my mind racing. My marriage was falling apart, and I couldn't let it happen without a fight. But I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed a plan. The note was the tipping point. As much as it crushed me, it also fueled my determination. If Emily was lying to me, I needed to know everything. Confronting her without a plan would only give her the chance to twist the truth. That night, I played along like nothing had changed. I asked her about her day, laughed at her jokes, and even offered to clean up after dinner. But inside, I was burning with questions. Who wrote the note? What else had she been hiding from me? The GPS tracker didn't disappoint. A few nights later, Emily told me she had another late gym session. Instead of staying home, I followed her again. The tracker led me not to the gym but to a small, dimly lit restaurant on the edge of town. I parked far enough away to avoid being noticed and walked toward the window. My chest tightened as I spotted her sitting at a corner table, with Mark. They were laughing, leaning in close, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of a candle. It wasn't just casual conversation. There was something intimate in the way they looked at each other, the way she smiled at him, a smile I hadn't seen in months. I stepped back from the window, my mind racing. I couldn't storm in there, not yet. I needed undeniable proof. I took out my phone and snapped a few photos. My hands were shaking, but I managed to get clear shots of them holding hands across the table. As I stood there, a wave of memories washed over me. Our wedding day, our plans for the future, the promises we made to each other. It felt like all of it was crumbling before my eyes. When Emily returned home later that night, she acted as if nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek and asked about my day, completely unaware that I had followed her. The next morning, I started digging deeper. I checked her phone bill for unusual activity and found countless calls and texts to a number I didn't recognize. My heart sank when I looked up the number. It belonged to Mark. But the worst discovery was yet to come. In her email, I found a series of messages between her and Mark. They talked about meeting up, about how much they missed each other, and about the risks of me finding out. One message stopped me cold. "Don't worry, he's clueless. I'll handle it if he ever suspects anything. My jaw clenched, and my vision blurred with anger. Clueless. Did she really think so little of me? 4 days, I kept up the charade. Every smile, every shared meal felt like a lie, but I was determined to gather everything I needed before confronting her. I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this. But as I pieced together the truth, I realized something else. Emily wasn't the only one lying. Mark had secrets of his own, ones that could turn this entire situation on its head. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to uncover a betrayal far deeper than I had imagined. Armed with undeniable proof of Emily's betrayal, I knew I couldn't let this drag on any longer. But instead of confronting her right away, I decided to dig deeper into Mark. If he was the one wrecking my marriage, I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with. A quick search through social media revealed that Mark's life wasn't as simple as he let on. He portrayed himself as the picture-perfect fitness coach, motivational posts, gym selfies, and glowing client reviews. But as I scrolled further back, something didn't add up. There were photos of him with a woman, a beautiful brunette who seemed to be more than just a friend. In one post from a year ago, he called her the love of my life. But she hadn't appeared in his recent posts. Curious, I clicked on her profile, only to find it set to private. Her name was Claire. I couldn't shake the feeling that Claire held the key to Mark's secrets. Using an anonymous account, I sent her a message. I didn't expect a reply, but to my surprise, she responded within hours. "Who is this?" she asked. "I'm someone who needs to know the truth about Mark," I replied. At first, she was defensive, but when I mentioned Emily and the affair, Claire's tone changed. "That bastard," she wrote. "So he's at it again." My heart raced as Claire began spilling everything. She and Mark had been engaged, but their relationship ended abruptly 6 months ago when she discovered he'd been cheating with multiple women. "He's a predator," she told me. "He charms women, gains their trust, and then uses them. He doesn't care about anyone but himself." The more she revealed, the angrier I became. Mark wasn't just a homewrecker, he was a serial manipulator, preying on vulnerable women like Emily. But why Emily? What did he stand to gain? Claire answered that question too. He targets women who seem unhappy or insecure. He thrives on the thrill of control. As I read her messages, everything clicked. Emily wasn't just cheating. She was being manipulated by someone who knew exactly how to exploit her weaknesses. My anger at her began to mix with a strange sense of pity. She'd betrayed me, yes, but she was also a pawn in Mark's twisted game. I thanked Claire for her honesty and asked if she'd be willing to help me expose Mark. She agreed without hesitation. "He deserves to be taken down," she said. With Claire's help, I hatched a plan to confront both Emily and Mark in a way they wouldn't see coming. It wasn't just about getting justice for myself anymore. It was about stopping Mark from hurting anyone else. But as I prepared to put my plan into motion, I uncovered something even more shocking. Mark wasn't just targeting Emily. There was another woman involved, someone closer to us than I ever imagined. Claire's information weighed heavily on me, but it also gave me purpose. I spent the next few days quietly gathering evidence, documenting every text, email, and location Emily had visited with Mark. The betrayal stung, but I kept my emotions in check. I wasn't ready to confront them, not yet. But then, the unthinkable happened. One evening, as I reviewed the GPS tracker logs, something caught my eye. Emily's car had been parked outside a familiar address, James's house. James. My best friend. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. There had to be a mistake. James had been my rock throughout this nightmare, the one person I trusted. But why was Emily at his house? And why hadn't he mentioned it? I called James, trying to sound casual. "Hey man, what are you up to tonight?" "Just relaxing at home," he said without hesitation. My stomach twisted. "That's good. Haven't seen you in a while. Mind if I swing by?" There was a slight pause before he answered. Not tonight. I'm a bit under the weather. Maybe tomorrow." His voice was steady, but something felt off. James never turned me away. I decided to investigate. Grabbing my car keys, I drove to his house. I parked down the street and walked toward his front yard, careful to stay hidden. The lights were on, and through the window, I saw two figures in the living room. Emily and James. They weren't sitting close, but their body language told me everything I needed to know. Emily looked distressed, her hands fidgeting in her lap. James was leaning toward her, speaking in low, urgent tones. I wanted to burst through the door, but I forced myself to wait. Bursting in now wouldn't give me the answers I needed. Instead, I stepped back into the shadows and pulled out my phone, recording everything I could. Eventually, Emily left, and I stayed hidden as her car disappeared down the street. My hands shook as I dialed James's number again. "Hey, still feeling sick?" I asked, barely masking the anger in my voice. "Yeah, man," he replied casually. "Just taking it easy." "You're a liar," I snapped. There was silence on the line before he stammered. "What are you talking about?" "I saw her, James. Emily. At your house. What the hell is going on?" He sighed heavily, his tone shifting. "Look, it's not what you think. She came to me because she didn't know who else to talk to. She's been struggling, okay?" "Struggling with what?" I demanded. James hesitated. "With you. She said you've been distant, that your marriage has been falling apart. She needed someone to vent to. I didn't buy it for a second. And you just decided to keep that from me? You let her come to you behind my back and said nothing." "I didn't want to make things worse," he said defensively. "I was trying to help." His words only made my anger boil. "Help? By sneaking around with my wife? If you're so innocent, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew you'd react like this," he shouted. "You've been paranoid for weeks, and I didn't want to add fuel to the fire." I hung up before he could say more. His excuses didn't make sense, and the betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. My best friend and my wife. How long had this been going on? The next day, I confronted Emily. "Were you at James's house last night?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. Her eyes widened, and she stumbled over her words. I was. "But it's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is," I said, my patience running thin. She hesitated, then said, "I went to him because I needed advice. I didn't know how to talk to you about us." "Don't lie to me, Emily," I snapped. "I know about Mark. I know about the texts, the emails, the late-night meetups. So tell me the truth. How long has this been going on?" Her face paled, and tears welled up in her eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered. Her denial was like a slap in the face. She wasn't just betraying me, she was insulting my intelligence. But I wasn't done yet. I had one more card to play, one that would expose the full extent of the lies. Emily's denial left me speechless, but I had reached my limit. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore, it was about uncovering the entire web of lies. I was done playing the nice guy. "Stop lying to me, Emily." I slammed my hand on the table, my voice trembling with anger. "I followed you, I've seen the texts, the pictures. I know about Mark. And don't think I don't know about James either. So tell me the truth, or I swear, I'll make sure everyone finds out who you really are." She froze, tears streaming down her face, but this time, they didn't move me. I wasn't falling for the act. Finally, she whispered, "Fine. You want the truth? You'll get it, but you're not going to like it." I crossed my arms, waiting. "I'm listening." She wiped her face and began. "Yes, I've been meeting Mark. It started as fitness training, but he made me feel seen, understood, and things went too far. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did." I clenched my fists, the anger burning in my chest, but I stayed silent, letting her continue. "And James," she paused, looking away. "He's been my confidant. I went to him because I felt like I couldn't talk to you anymore. He's been helping me navigate everything." "Helping you navigate?" I scoffed. "By keeping your dirty secrets? By lying to my face?" Her voice cracked. It wasn't like that. James was just trying to help. He's not involved in whatever you think he is. But I wasn't buying it. The tension with James, the late-night visits, it didn't add up. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. Let me make one thing clear, Emily. I know more than you think. I opened the photos I'd taken of her and Mark at the restaurant, showing her the undeniable proof. Her face crumbled as she stared at the images. Don't bother denying it, I said coldly. I have everything I need to destroy both of you. But before I do, let me tell you what I've discovered about Mark. Her expression shifted from guilt to confusion. What do you mean? Mark isn't who you think he is. He's not some knight in shining armor saving you from your miserable life. He's a con artist, Emily. He's done this before, to other women. You're just another one of his victims. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I pressed on. I spoke to Claire, his ex-fiancée. She told me everything. Mark used her, just like he's using you. And guess what? You're not even the only one. He's been seeing someone else, too. Emily's face went pale, and she staggered back into her chair. No, that can't be true. It is, I said firmly. And you've been lying to me while he's been lying to you. Do you see how pathetic this is? You threw away our life for someone who doesn't care about you. Tears poured down her cheeks as she shook her head. I didn't know. I didn't know any of this. Of course you didn't, I snapped. Because you were too busy playing the victim to see the truth. But just as I thought I had the upper hand, Emily dropped a bombshell of her own. There's more, she said, her voice trembling. Something I've been hiding because I was scared. Scared of what it would do to you. What now, Emily? I said, exasperated. She looked me straight in the eye and said, I think Mark might be the father of the baby I lost last year. The words hit me like a freight train. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. The miscarriage had been devastating for both of us, or so I thought. And now, to hear that it might not have even been my child? I stared at her, struggling to process the revelation. Are you serious? She nodded, tears flowing freely. I wasn't sure. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought it would destroy you. Destroy me, I shouted. You've already done that, Emily. Do you have any idea what you've put me through? The room felt like it was spinning, the weight of her words suffocating me. But even as the pain threatened to consume me, I realized something. This wasn't just about Emily or Mark anymore. James had known about all of this, maybe even more than he let on. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to stop until I had them. I couldn't keep myself together anymore. Emily's confession about Mark possibly being the father of the baby we'd lost, it shattered everything. The lies, the betrayal, the manipulation, it all came crashing down on me, and I was left standing there, heartbroken and furious. But one thing was clear, I couldn't let this end like this. I had to confront James. There was no way I could let him slide by after everything he had done. He was supposed to be my best friend, and yet, here I was, on the edge of losing it all. I left Emily sitting there, broken and crying, and I drove straight to James's house. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, I could feel my knuckles turning white. The rage burned inside me, but there was a coldness to it now. I wasn't just angry at James, I was disgusted. When I arrived, I didn't knock. I didn't bother with pleasantries. I marched in through the front door, catching James off guard. "Hey man, what's going on?" he asked, trying to sound casual, but I could see the flicker of fear in his eyes. "Cut the crap, James," I snapped. "You knew. You knew about Emily and Mark, didn't you? You knew what was happening behind my back, and you did nothing." His face paled, and for a moment he opened his mouth like he was going to say something. But nothing came out. "You're damn right I knew," he finally admitted. "But it wasn't what you think. I wasn't trying to hurt you, man. I just what, James?" I yelled, the anger building inside me again. "Just watched my wife destroy our marriage? Watched her tear our life apart and didn't say a word. I was trying to protect you, he said, his voice weak. I knew if I told you, you'd go crazy. You'd end things with her. I didn't want that for you. You're my best friend, and I didn't want to see you get hurt. You didn't want me to get hurt? I was practically screaming now. You've already hurt me more than I could ever imagine. You've betrayed me in the worst way possible. You let her come to you when I needed you the most. I thought I was helping, okay, he said, his voice shaking. I didn't know what to do. She was falling apart, and Enough. I shouted. You've done enough. You've hurt me, and you've hurt her. You both have. And now I'm done. There was a long, tense silence. James didn't speak. Neither of us moved. Finally, I spoke again, quieter but with more finality. I'm done, James. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. And as for Emily, I don't know what's going to happen with us. I don't even know if I want to try anymore. He looked at me, eyes filled with regret. I'm sorry, man. I really am. But his apology did nothing to fix what had been broken. I turned and walked out of his house, leaving him behind. As I drove away, I felt a strange sense of peace, like I had finally taken control of my life again. But that peace was fleeting. The reality of the situation still hit me hard. My marriage was a wreck. My best friend had turned into a stranger. And I was left picking up the pieces of a life I no longer recognized. Over the next few weeks, Emily and I tried to talk, tried to heal. But it wasn't the same. Every time I looked at her, I saw the lies, the secrets, the betrayal. I couldn't erase the images of her with Mark, of her with James. In the end, I made the hardest decision of my life. I asked Emily to leave. It wasn't easy, and the pain was unbearable, but it was the only way for me to move forward. I needed time to rebuild, to regain my sense of self. I couldn't let them continue to control my life. As for James, we never spoke again. His betrayal was too deep, too unforgivable. Months passed, and the hurt slowly began to fade. I focused on myself, on my job, my friends, my health. Slowly, I regained the strength I'd lost. Eventually, I found peace. Not with Emily, not with James, but with myself. If you've ever been through betrayal, you know how hard it is to find the strength to move on. But remember, no matter how deep the hurt, there's always hope for a fresh start. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more intense and dramatic tales. You're not alone. Let's walk this journey together.